I choose Miss Keisha to be my new mommy. The innocent words of 7-year-old Layla Al Mansouri echoed through the crystal chandelier-adorned ballroom of the Beverly Hills mansion, causing 43-year-old oil magnate Omar Al Mansouri to freeze in shock. He had just finished introducing his daughter to 12 of the wealthiest, most socially prominent women in Los Angeles society, each one carefully selected as a potential stepmother candidate after his wife's death 6 months earlier. But instead of choosing the heiress to a pharmaceutical fortune, the socialite, married to a tech mogul, or the former ambassador's daughter, Layla had pointed directly at Keisha Williams, the 31-year-old African-American woman who had been quietly serving refreshments to the guests throughout the afternoon. The silence that followed was deafening. Mrs. Victoria Pemberton, whose family owned half of Newport Beach, actually gasped audibly. Elena Rodriguez, whose father controlled the largest media empire on the West Coast, looked around the room as if she had misheard something. Dr. Miranda Chen, the renowned surgeon whose medical practice catered exclusively to Hollywood celebrities, stared at the little girl with undisguised confusion. None of these women, accustomed to being the most sought-after companions in their social circles, could process that a 7-year-old had just rejected all of them in favor of the hired help. Omar felt his carefully orchestrated plan crumbling around him. The idea had seemed so progressive, so modern, to allow his daughter to have input into choosing her future stepmother from among the most eligible women in their social sphere. He had spent weeks arranging this gathering, ensuring that each woman understood they were being considered for marriage to one of the wealthiest Arab Americans in California. The women had competed subtly throughout the afternoon, showcasing their refinement, their educational achievements, their social connections, and their suitability as mothers for a child of privilege. But Keisha Williams, who had been working in the Al Mansouri household for 3 years as head housekeeper and had naturally helped serve during today's gathering, had never been considered a candidate for anything beyond domestic employment. She stood frozen near the refreshment table, a silver tray still balanced in her hands, her dark eyes wide with the same shock that had seized everyone else in the room. The idea that she could be chosen as a mother figure, let alone as a wife to her employer, was so far outside the realm of possibility that she seemed unable to process what had just happened. "Sweetheart," Omar said carefully, kneeling down to his daughter's eye level while acutely aware that 12 pairs of expensive eyes were watching his every move, "I think you might be confused about what we're doing today. These ladies are here because Daddy is thinking about getting married again, and I wanted you to meet them and tell me which one you think would make the best new mommy for you." "But I already told you," Layla replied, with the stubborn certainty that only children possess. "I want Miss Keisha to be my new mommy. She's the one who takes care of me when I'm sick, who helps me with my homework, who reads me stories at bedtime, and who makes me feel safe when I have bad dreams. The other ladies seem nice, but they don't know me like Miss Keisha does." The awkwardness in the room became almost unbearable. These were women who had never been rejected for anything in their lives, women whose social calendars were filled with people competing for their attention and approval. To be dismissed by a child in favor of domestic staff was not just surprising, it was socially humiliating in a way that none of them had ever experienced. Mrs. Pemberton was the first to recover her composure, though her voice carried an edge that hadn't been there before. "Omar, perhaps we should discuss this privately. Children sometimes become confused about the difference between employees and family members, especially after experiencing the loss of a parent." Dr. Chen nodded in agreement, her professional demeanor barely concealing her irritation. "It's quite common for children to form attachments to caregivers during times of grief. With proper guidance, Layla can learn to understand appropriate social boundaries and make a more suitable choice." But Layla, oblivious to the social undercurrents swirling around her, walked directly over to Keisha and took her hand. "Miss Keisha, you want to be my new mommy, don't you? You already take better care of me than anyone else ever has, and you make Daddy smile when you talk to him about my school projects and my ballet lessons." Keisha finally found her voice, though it trembled with emotion and embarrassment. "Layla, sweetheart, that's very sweet of you to say, but I think there might be some confusion here. Your daddy was introducing you to these very lovely ladies so you could get to know them better. I'm just here to help serve refreshments." But what none of the assembled women realized was that 7-year-old Layla Al Mansouri had been observing the adults in her life with the brutal honesty that children possess, and her choice was based on months of careful evaluation that had nothing to do with social status and everything to do with genuine care, emotional availability, and authentic connection. Over the past 6 months since her mother's death from cancer, Layla had been watching how different people treated her when they thought no one important was looking, and Keisha Williams had consistently demonstrated the kind of unconditional love and attention that Layla desperately needed. The other women in the room represented everything that Omar's social circle valued: wealth, education, family connections, and the kind of refined sophistication that would enhance his standing in Los Angeles society. Mrs. Pemberton had attended the finest boarding schools and could trace her lineage back to the Mayflower. Elena Rodriguez spoke 4 languages fluently and had been featured on the cover of Town and Country magazine. Dr. Chen had saved the lives of countless celebrities and politicians, earning her a reputation as one of the most skilled surgeons on the West Coast. But during the 2 hours they had spent at the mansion, none of these accomplished women had shown genuine interest in connecting with Layla as a person, rather than as an accessory to their potential marriage to Omar. They had spoken to her politely but distantly, asking perfunctory questions about school and hobbies without really listening to her answers. When Layla had tried to show Mrs. Pemberton her favorite book, the woman had smiled tightly and redirected the conversation back to adult topics. When Elena Rodriguez had complimented Layla's dress, it felt rehearsed and impersonal, the kind of comment adults make when they're trying to appear child-friendly without actually engaging with children. Dr. Chen had perhaps tried the hardest to connect, discussing Layla's interest in science and asking about her favorite subjects in school. But even her attempts at bonding felt clinical and calculated, as if she were following a prescribed formula for winning over a potential stepchild rather than genuinely caring about getting to know Layla as an individual. Keisha, by contrast, had spent the afternoon moving quietly through the room, refilling glasses and offering refreshments. But Layla had noticed how Keisha's eyes always found her, checking to make sure she was comfortable and included in conversations. When one of the women had made a comment that went over Layla's head, Keisha had caught her confused expression and later quietly explained the reference. When Layla had spilled juice on her dress, Keisha had immediately appeared with a wet cloth and gentle reassurance that accidents happen to everyone. Most importantly, Keisha had been the one constant source of stability and comfort in Layla's life since her mother's death. While Omar had buried himself in work to cope with his grief, and while other family members had provided sporadic attention, Keisha had been consistently present, patient, and emotionally available. She had been the one to hold Layla when she cried for her mother, to maintain bedtime routines that provided security, and to listen without judgment when Layla expressed her fears about the future. Omar looked around the room at the 12 women who represented everything his social world valued, then looked at his daughter holding hands with the woman who had actually been mothering her for months. The contrast was stark and undeniable. These society women had been treating the afternoon as a competition for a prestigious marriage, while Keisha had been treating it as just another day of caring for a child she genuinely loved. Mrs. Pemberton cleared her throat delicately. "Omar, I think it would be best if we continued this conversation at another time, when you've had a chance to provide Layla with appropriate guidance about these matters." Elena Rodriguez nodded in agreement. Perhaps a child psychologist could help her understand the difference between hired help and potential family members. It's important for children of privilege to learn proper social distinctions. Dr. Chen added her professional opinion. Children who have experienced trauma often form inappropriate attachments as a coping mechanism. With proper intervention, these can be redirected toward more suitable relationships. But as Omar listened to these women discussing his daughter as if she were a problem to be solved, rather than a person whose feelings mattered, he began to see the situation through different eyes. Layla wasn't confused or traumatized. She was perceptive. She had evaluated the character and genuine care of everyone around her, and made her choice based on substance rather than surface. The uncomfortable truth was that none of these accomplished, wealthy, socially prominent women had demonstrated the kind of authentic maternal instinct that Keisha showed naturally and consistently. They had approached the afternoon as a social opportunity, a chance to secure an advantageous marriage, while Keisha had approached it as she approached every day, with genuine concern for Layla's well-being and happiness. "Thank you all for coming today," Omar said finally, his voice carrying a new tone of authority and decision. I think this has been very enlightening, and I have a lot to consider. Perhaps it would be best if we ended this gathering now, so I can spend some time thinking about what's truly best for my daughter." The women began gathering their designer handbags and making polite but strained farewells, each one clearly expecting that Omar would contact them privately to apologize for his daughter's inappropriate choice and arrange a more suitable selection process. But as they filed out of the mansion, Omar found himself watching Keisha, who was efficiently cleaning up the refreshment service while keeping one eye on Layla to make sure she wasn't overwhelmed by the social tension. After the last guest had departed, Omar sat down heavily in his study, trying to process what had just happened. His plan to find Layla a socially appropriate stepmother had been completely derailed by his daughter's unexpected choice, but as he thought about it more carefully, he began to realize that Layla's selection revealed truths about his own priorities and values that made him deeply uncomfortable. Keisha knocked softly on his study door. "Mr. Al Mansouri, I wanted to apologize for any embarrassment this afternoon might have caused. I had no idea that Layla was going to say what she said, and I certainly never intended to disrupt your gathering or put you in an awkward position with your guests." Omar gestured for her to sit down, something that had never happened in their 3-year employer-employee relationship. "Keisha, you don't need to apologize for anything. If anyone should be apologizing, it's me, for putting you in such an uncomfortable situation. But I have to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you think my daughter is happy?" The question clearly caught Keisha off guard. She hesitated for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Mr. Al Mansouri, Layla is a wonderful little girl who has been through a tremendous loss. She's resilient and smart and loving, but she's also been struggling with her mother's death in ways that I'm not sure adults always recognize." "What do you mean?" Omar asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Keisha took a deep breath before continuing. "She misses having someone who puts her first, who's available when she needs comfort, who knows her favorite foods and her fears and her dreams. I know you love her very much, but you've been dealing with your own grief, and work has been demanding, and she's been spending a lot of time with people who care about her but don't really know her." The truth of Keisha's words hit Omar like a physical blow. In the months since his wife's death, he had indeed thrown himself into work as a way of avoiding his own emotional pain. He had told himself that maintaining financial stability and social standing was the best way to provide for Layla's future, but he had neglected to consider what she needed in the present moment. "You've been the one taking care of her emotional needs, haven't you?" Omar realized. "While I've been focused on business and social obligations, you've been the one providing the day-to-day love and attention that she's needed." Keisha nodded quietly. "It's been my privilege to care for her. She's an extraordinary child who deserves all the love and attention in the world. But I want you to know that I never intended for her to become so attached to me, and I certainly never imagined that she would think of me as a potential mother figure." Omar studied Keisha's face, really looking at her for perhaps the first time in their 3-year working relationship. He saw intelligence, compassion, genuine care for his daughter, and a strength of character that had been invisible to him when he was focused only on her role as domestic staff. "Why do you think she chose you today?" he asked. "Because I see her," Keisha replied simply. "When she's excited about something, I get excited with her. When she's scared or sad, I sit with her until she feels better. When she accomplishes something, I celebrate with her. I don't just take care of her physical needs, I pay attention to who she is as a person." Omar realized that this was exactly what had been missing from his interactions with the 12 wealthy women who had visited that afternoon. They had seen Layla as a responsibility to be managed, a child to be molded into an appropriate social role, rather than as a complete person whose thoughts and feelings mattered. Keisha saw Layla as someone worthy of love and attention, simply because she existed, not because of what she might become or represent. The next few weeks passed in a strange state of suspension. Omar found himself observing his household with new eyes, paying attention to the relationship between Keisha and Layla in ways he had never bothered to notice before. He saw how Keisha anticipated Layla's needs without being asked, how she listened to endless stories about school friends and playground drama with genuine interest, how she provided comfort during moments of sadness without trying to rush Layla through her emotions. He also began to notice things about Keisha herself that he had overlooked during their years of employer-employee interaction. She was completing a master's degree in child psychology through evening classes, something she had never mentioned, despite the fact that it was directly relevant to her care of Layla. She volunteered at a local literacy program on weekends, helping children from low-income families develop reading skills. She had a quick wit and thoughtful perspective on current events that emerged during conversations about Layla's homework assignments. Most significantly, Omar began to see how much genuine joy Keisha found in caring for his daughter. This wasn't just a job for her, it was a calling. She approached each day with enthusiasm for whatever adventures or challenges Layla might present. And she had created an environment of safety and love that had helped his daughter navigate the most difficult period of her young life. 3 weeks after the disastrous gathering, Omar made a decision that shocked his social circle and his family. He asked Keisha if she would consider having dinner with him and Layla, not as an employee, but as a guest, so they could discuss Layla's future as 3 people who all cared about her well-being. The conversation that followed was unlike anything Omar had ever experienced. Instead of discussing social compatibility, financial arrangements, or family connections, they talked about Layla's dreams, her fears, her academic interests, and her emotional needs. Keisha demonstrated an understanding of his daughter that surpassed his own, not because she was more intelligent or more caring than he was, but because she had been paying attention in ways that he had not. When Omar asked Keisha what she thought Layla needed most, her answer was simple but profound. She needs to know that she's loved unconditionally, that the adults in her life will prioritize her happiness over their own convenience or social expectations, and that she can trust the people who claim to care about her to actually be present when she needs them. Over the following months, Omar began to court Keisha in the most unconventional way possible. Instead of expensive restaurants and social events, their dates consisted of family activities with Layla, conversations about child development and education, and shared experiences that built genuine intimacy based on common values rather than social compatibility. The reaction from Omar's social circle was swift and harsh. Former friends questioned his judgment. Business associates expressed concern about his reputation, and family members pressured him to reconsider what they saw as a catastrophic social mistake. But as Omar watched Layla flourish under the consistent love and attention of 2 adults who genuinely prioritized her well-being over social expectations, he realized that his daughter's happiness was worth more than any social approval. 1 year after that awkward afternoon in his ballroom, Omar Al Mansouri married Keisha Williams in a small ceremony attended by the people who truly mattered to them. Layla served as the flower girl, beaming with the confidence of a child who had been heard, valued, and loved exactly as she was. The 12 wealthy women who had been rejected that day went on to make socially appropriate marriages within their own circles, but none of them ever forgot the afternoon when a 7-year-old girl taught them that love and character mattered more than social status and financial compatibility. The transformation in Omar's perspective didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't without significant social and professional consequences. Within weeks of announcing his engagement to Keisha, several major business deals fell through as potential partners expressed concerns about his judgment and social standing. Family members organized interventions, bringing religious leaders and respected community elders to convince him that he was making a mistake that would bring shame to the Al Mansouri name for generations. His mother, Fatima Al Mansouri, flew in from Dubai specifically to address what she saw as a crisis that threatened the family's reputation. During a tense confrontation in Omar's study, she presented a plan for him to quietly end his relationship with Keisha and choose an appropriate wife from prominent Arab families. But when Fatima demanded to speak with her granddaughter about the importance of maintaining family traditions, Layla's response surprised everyone involved. "Grandmother," she said with the directness that only children possess, "Miss Keisha makes Daddy happy in ways that he hasn't been since Mommy died. She makes me feel safe and loved every single day. If you can't see how good she is for our family, then maybe you don't really know what's best for us." Even more challenging for Omar were the reactions from the 12 women who had been present during that fateful afternoon. Mrs. Pemberton launched a social campaign to isolate Omar from their shared circles, suggesting his judgment had been compromised by grief. Elena Rodriguez used her family's media connections to ensure Omar's engagement was covered in ways that emphasized the unconventional nature of his choice. But as Omar weathered these social storms, he began to understand that the reactions revealed more about their character than about his choices. The people who truly cared about his and Layla's well-being continued to support him, while those who valued social standing over human happiness revealed themselves to be fair-weather friends. Meanwhile, Keisha faced her own challenges, navigating the transition from employee to family member. Her own family struggled to understand how she could consider marrying someone who had employed her, worrying about power dynamics. Some accused her of being motivated by financial gain rather than genuine love. But Keisha's response demonstrated the same strength of character that had attracted Omar and won Layla's trust. "I'm not marrying Omar because he's wealthy," she explained to her skeptical sister. "I'm marrying him because we share the same values about family and what children need to thrive. The fact that he has money doesn't change who I am or what I believe in." The wedding planning process became another opportunity for Omar and Keisha to demonstrate their commitment to values over appearances. Instead of the elaborate society wedding that Omar's status would normally require, they chose a small ceremony focused on people who genuinely cared about their happiness. The guest list included Keisha's family, Omar's supportive business associates, and Layla's teachers who had witnessed the positive changes in her life. The ceremony reflected their shared values and commitment to building a family based on love rather than social expectation. Layla played a central role, not just as flower girl but as an active participant in the vows, expressing her commitment to their new family structure. In the months following their marriage, the positive changes in Layla's development became undeniable. Her academic performance improved dramatically as she gained confidence from consistent emotional support. Her social skills flourished as she learned to navigate relationships based on authenticity rather than social positioning. Most importantly, her emotional resilience grew as she experienced what it meant to be truly seen and valued. Even some of the women who had been rejected that afternoon eventually came to understand the wisdom of Layla's choice. Mrs. Pemberton's own marriage to a socially appropriate but emotionally distant husband ended in divorce when she realized that compatibility on paper didn't translate to happiness. Elena Rodriguez found herself drawn to volunteer work with underprivileged children, discovering that her media skills could highlight social issues rather than just social events. 5 years after that afternoon in the ballroom, Layla Al Mansouri Williams had grown into a confident, compassionate 12-year-old who understood intuitively that people's value came from their character rather than their circumstances. She excelled academically while maintaining close friendships across different social and economic backgrounds, having learned from her parents' example that authentic relationships were built on mutual respect and shared values rather than social compatibility. Before we wrap this story up, I'd like to thank you for reaching this far. And if you enjoyed this story as much as I think you did, then be sure to show your support by liking and subscribing to this channel. Now back to the story. The Al Mansouri Williams family had also become advocates for other families, navigating similar challenges, supporting organizations that help domestic workers pursue education and career advancement, and mentoring interracial and cross-class couples who faced social pressure to conform to traditional expectations. Their story had become an example of how love and wisdom could triumph over prejudice and social convention when people had the courage to prioritize what truly mattered. Omar learned that his daughter possessed wisdom that exceeded his own, that authentic relationships were built on substance rather than surface, and that sometimes the most important person in the room is the one everyone else overlooks. Keisha discovered that her value as a person extended far beyond her role as domestic staff, and that her capacity for love and nurturing made her worthy of being chosen by people who mattered. Layla grew up in a household where her voice was heard, her feelings were valued, and her instincts about people were trusted and respected. She learned that true worth comes from character rather than social position, and that the most important choices in life should be based on love rather than expectation. Most importantly, she learned that sometimes a 7-year-old's honest evaluation of the adults around her could change not just her own life, but the lives of everyone willing to listen to wisdom regardless of its source.